the final session of the Vital Village Networks of Opportunity for Child Wellbeing 2023 webinar series, Collaborative Action and Coalition Building, Transformative Practices for Healing, Joy, and Equity. I'm Ronda Alexander, Director of National Partnerships here at Vital Village Networks. During this series, we're spending time hearing from leaders across the country who are using collective leadership approaches to design, build, and foster communities centered on the healing and joy of children and families. So we're excited to be wrapping up our 2023 series today, hearing from two members of the 2023 cohort of our Food Systems Fellowship. They're both working to build equitable food systems, relationships, and partnerships in their respective communities. So as we begin our time together, I'd like to acknowledge that we are continuing to strengthen our language justice practices. And this webinar series will be available in Spanish with interpretation services provided through our partners at the Community Language Cooperative based in Colorado. At this time, I'd like to welcome Jasmine to provide us with a brief orientation.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Jasmine. I'm here from the CLC. What we practice is something called language justice. And many of you have probably been acquainted with this in some way or another, but that just means creating spaces where folks can speak and participate in the language of their hearts. So to do this, I'm going to be offering simultaneous interpretation for this meeting. As soon as we finish this, you'll see a globe pop up at the bottom of your screen. I ask that you please click on that globe and select your preferred language. I, again, just want to remind the speakers to please take your time with your words. And if y'all are having any issues with the audio, you can send a message via the chat. I'll be happy to respond that way. I'm going to repeat this in Spanish now. Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Yasmín. Estoy aquí de parte de la CLC. Lo que nosotros practicamos es justicia de lenguaje. Y como muchos de ustedes probablemente ya han escuchado, esto significa que queremos crear espacios donde la gente pueda escuchar y participar en el idioma de su corazón. Para hacer esto, voy a proporcionar interpretación simultánea durante esta reunión. En cuanto termine de dar estas instrucciones, voy a encender esa función y en ese momento van a ver un globo en la parte inferior de la pantalla que dice interpretación. Les pido que por favor hagan clic ahí y seleccionen su idioma preferido. Les pido que también tengan en mente su velocidad, ya que el español es largo que el inglés, y si están teniendo algún problema con el audio, me pueden mandar un mensaje por el chat y ahí con mucho gusto les ayudo. Ya vamos a comenzar. Muchísimas gracias. All right, we can go ahead and start interpretation. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. Just taking a moment to select my language. At this time, again, take a moment to select the language using the globe icon. Select the language that suits your needs, and we'll continue. So today's webinar will be recorded and available on the Now form within the next couple of days. Also, I encourage you to engage with us by sharing what resonates with you in the chat box and submitting questions through the Q&A. Our guests will have the opportunity to respond to questions a little bit later in the hour. So while we only are together for an hour, it will be jam-packed with stories and lessons from the field and practices, best practices that we can take back to our own communities. So we'll share a brief overview of Vital Village Networks and Now, followed by remarks from our featured speakers. And then later you'll be able to pose questions and through a panel discussion and Q&A. And then we'll wrap up with a few announcements before closing. So whether you're joining us for the first time or you've been with us for a while, I'd really just like to offer a brief overview of Vital Village Networks. We are a collective of change makers committed to pioneering sustainable approaches to transform child, family, and community well-being. We're rooted in Boston with a broad web of peers and partners across the country, all connected through our networks of opportunity for child well-being, otherwise known as Now. We are bonded through our guiding principles of creating shared spaces for belonging, learning, engaging, and transforming our communities together. To learn more about our work and share your own stories, we invite you to visit the Now Innovation Forum, where you can find access to a variety of tools, resources, and stories of leaders working collaboratively to shift what it means for our children, our families, and our communities to thrive. So, now that you've been oriented to Vital Village Networks, and now I'd love to begin to transition to hearing from our speakers, Vital Village Networks Food Systems Fellows, Hallie Nelson and Kim Ross. Both their bios and links to additional resources are going to be available in the chat. So I encourage you to explore them following our time together. Also, as I turn things over to our speakers, I want to invite you to not only listen, but to consider what you're hearing and what actions you might take to advance your own work. So following this session, you'll receive a reflection guide for your personal use that can help you unpack what you've heard and think about how you might apply it to your own work. And that document or that guide is available in both English and Spanish. So without further ado, here's just a quick example of the guide. I'd like to turn things over to Hallie Nelson, Director of the Jefferson County Food Policy Council. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here today to share with you all a little bit about our Food Policy Council and how we build relationships and partnerships towards an equitable food system. So next slide. This is just kind of what we're going to go over. I'll introduce our Food Policy Council, talk a little bit about what our local context is and what our food system looks like. And then I'm going to talk to you all about how we build our coalition and take collaborative action together. And then kind of our lessons learned and where we're going from here. Next slide. So we are the Jefferson County Food Policy Council. We're located in Jefferson County, Colorado, which is the fourth most populous county in the state. And we stretch from the west side of the Denver metro region up into the foothills of the Rockies. So we've got kind of a urban suburban area of our county up into like rural mountainous area. And our motto as a council is that we drive community-led change for a thriving food future. So to us, community leadership really means that the Food Policy Council staff, me and my coworker and community organizer, our role is to support all of our members in the changes that they are seeking to make in the food system. So sorry about my dog, if y'all can hear that. We have 280 members from across the food system, and our members include individuals who have been directly impacted by the food system, so they've experienced food insecurity or are part of marginalized populations or living in a low food access area. And then we also have organizations. So we've got nonprofits, we've got food pantries, farms, local government. So we've got a wide range of members, and our membership really is a range from just staying engaged through like newsletters and emails up to leading our advocacy and action teams. So we really have members that are involved kind of across the spectrum. And I'll talk a little bit more about how we developed our focuses later on, but we focus on school food, community leadership, food chain coordination, racial equity, and youth engagement. Next slide. And then just a little bit more background on our Food Policy Council. Our mission is to influence policy to increase equitable access to healthy, local, and affordable food and support a sustainable community food system. So by policy, we kind of think about that broadly. So there's kind of the big P policy, like federal, state policies. And then there's kind of the smaller P policy that we work on, which is policies that food pantries use and how they distribute their food, or policies that our school district uses to get school meals to students. And so we really are focused on the local level, and we work a lot kind of with that lower P policies and procedures to create change in our local food system. And then we partner with other organizations that are working on the state and federal level in the food system. And our vision is for our community to be food secure with healthy food access for all residents and a vibrant and equitable farming infrastructure, as well as a healthy ecosystem and thriving local food economy. So that's what we're working towards, really broad vision of a more sustainable and equitable system. Next slide. So our local food system, this is kind of like a diagram that shows who is involved in the Food Policy Council and how we're all connected. Our goal is to connect everyone who is acting within this food system locally so that we are sharing all of the resources that we do have and building connectivity and collaboration between all of these groups. So this is a pretty simplified version of the food system, but you've got your production sector, which we have a lot of small farmers growing on 1/4 of an acre or less. And then we've got a lot of cottage food producers as well. Then we've got processing. So we have some local butchers that are able to do processing both in their store and take mobile units out to ranchers in neighboring counties. We've got food hubs that we work with, and one that's kind of in the process of starting right now. And then we've got local institutions like hospitals and schools. For the distribution side of things, this is probably the biggest, most active sector that we have in our Food Policy Council right now. So you have small retailers, farm stands, CSAs, which are boxes of food that you can pre-purchase from farms for the season, farmers markets, food pantries, and then again, food hubs and institutions. And then last, we have the consumption or the eating part of the food system, and that includes everyone in our county. But we have especially focused on reaching out to food pantry clients and volunteers and students and parents who are really interested in the local food system. And you can kind of think of the Food Policy Council as like the connector between these areas. And we, like I said, are trying to encourage the sharing of assets that we do have, and then working together to identify kind of what some of shared challenges are between like farmers and food pantries, for example. They both have a need for more refrigerated storage space. And so we encourage collaborative solutions across these sectors. Next slide. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about how we build coalition, how we built our coalition, and how it has changed over the course of our existence. So the Food Policy Council was created in 2015, and that was happening within our county health department, so the county public health. They got together with a bunch of different departments within public health and some other agencies who were concerned about child nutrition. And they realized that starting a Food Policy Council was the best solution at that time to address those child nutrition needs. And then as they started meeting, they kind of realized that they needed to have a system-wide focus on their work. So not just focus on child nutrition, but advance child nutrition by focusing on the full food system. So they did a lot of outreach to build a strong coalition that included nonprofit organizations, government agencies, and different local institutions like hospitals. But it was really organization focused. And so that's kind of what it looked like from 2016 to 2020. And then in 2020 and 2021, when the pandemic happened and there was a racial reckoning in the United States, they started realizing that they did not have the voice of community at the table or within the Food Policy Council. And that was something that they really wanted to strengthen. And they also kind of had a focus of a lot of education on policies, but being housed in local government weren't able to take as much action as they wanted to. So they voted in 2021 to move out of the health department. And in 2022, we got nonprofit status. We have a fiscal sponsor called Trailhead Institute. And now, since 2022, we have been really focused on both maintaining the coalition that we have of organizations and bringing in community leadership. And so I'll talk a little bit about how we've done that, but it has been a lot of really intentional outreach. And it has required us to restructure how the council works so that community leaders are really driving what we're focusing on. And we're really careful about power dynamics and yeah, just the interactions between organizations and community in our meeting spaces. Next slide. So I kind of outlined two of our main strategies for building this broader coalition and restructuring based around community leadership. So the first I'm calling creative outreach. There's this phrase that we hear a lot called meeting people where they are. And we have taken that very literally. So we go to farms, we went to food pantries. We're trying to find ways where we could reach out to people and understand their day-to-day without taking time away from the work that they're doing. And so that was really helpful for us to build relationships with different sectors of the food system and with people directly doing the work and on the front lines. We also worked to define our membership a little bit more and to restructure how the Food Policy Council was working so that everyone knew where they could fit in. We would use one-on-one meetings with people where we were going out to find them and meet with them. Then we would invite them to coffee or to lunch or something like that and really hear about what the issues that they saw in the food system were, what they were interested in. And then we were able to kind of share with them where they could fit into the Food Policy Council if they're interested. And then I think the biggest piece that has really transformed the membership of our council has been connecting across different languages and cultures. So language justice is a huge priority for us. We work with the Community Language Cooperative to provide interpretation at all of our meetings, whether in person or online. Both myself and our other staff member are bilingual in English and Spanish, and all of our written materials are provided in English and Spanish. And so that accessibility of language has really allowed our Spanish-speaking community to get deeply involved and become some of our strongest leaders in the Food Policy Council over the past year and a half or so. And then the last thing has been partnering with hyper-local organizations. So we're a pretty local organization focused on the county level, but we have also started partnering with organizations that are organizing their community at the city and town level and working with them on their local issues or plugging them into what's happening on the county. And that kind of partnership and involving those community leaders from those hyperlocal organizations in new ways has been really powerful to see some changes within some of the cities and towns in our county. And so that's kind of the outreach piece of it. There's also this piece of coalition building where you have to have a shared vision. And we've seen some shifts in what the shared vision has looked like now that our coalition is much broader and we have both organizations and community members. And so it's become really important for us to start each of our action teams and advocacy groups and onboarding of new members with creating shared goals or sharing what the group has established as their shared goals. We've also had to very explicitly create group expectations of how we interact with each other and what we're expecting of each other. And then we're kind of on an ongoing process of deferring leadership to our members and really having staff be in that facilitation role. Next slide. So really quickly, I'll talk about what our collaborative action looks like. So that coalition building creates the basis for our collaborative action. I mentioned all the one-on-one meetings we do. We took all of the issues that were brought up during those meetings and created a policy issue guide that was voted on and approved by all of our council members. And we are updating that on a yearly basis with issues that are impacting our community and that are being talked about a lot. From that issue guide, we did a voting process to prioritize our top 3 policy issues. And those will sound familiar: school food, community leadership, and coordinating our food chain. And so we created action teams around each of those top priority policy issues that are moving forward with very specific projects. So that's kind of what our collaborative action looks like. And then next slide. I'll just talk very briefly about what's next. We are still working on that creative outreach, continuing to build understanding of the role that each person in an organization can play throughout this transition and broadening of our coalition. We've seen some disengagement from organizations, and so doing some really direct outreach to them to make sure that they understand their role and how to engage. And then again, just continuing to build the leadership of our members more and more so that they're really driving this work forward. And then the last one is beginning to involve decision makers in the coalition directly. And so connecting with them and inviting them into our group and our processes. Next slide. So that's the end of my presentation. I know it's a really quick overview, and I'm really excited to get more into detail in the Q&A section. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Hallie. Really appreciate that. I see we already have some questions coming in, so I want to encourage folks. You can place questions in the chat. We'll do our best to get back to them when we get to the Q&A. Also, on your menu icon, there's a Q&A button. You can add questions there as well, so we'll make sure to grab those questions. Hallie, thank you so much. Can't wait to have you back in a few minutes. But next, we're going to be hearing from Kim Ross, the founder of Mount Terra LLC. So Kim, I'd love to welcome you to the screen and turning things over to you.
Thanks a lot, Rhonda. Hello, everyone. Yes, so my name is Kim Ross, and I am the founder of Mount Terra. Mount Terra is a minority-owned real estate development company that's focused on making rural Appalachia a more vibrant place for the residents to live, work, eat, shop, all of that good stuff. So today I'm talking about building equitable food systems in rural Appalachia. And in particular, Mount Terra, we have a project that we've launched called the Hugh Market Project. Next slide. All right. In order to get you a little bit familiar with the Hugh Market Project, even more in the area that I live in, I want to talk about statistics as it relates to food equity. Not all Appalachia is the same, but where I live, it's in Central Appalachia in Bluefield, West Virginia. And I'm also on the state line of Virginia. So that's kind of a cool thing, I guess. No, it is. Actually, it's very cool. So I live on the state line, but on the Bluefield, West Virginia side, we have around 10,000 residents. However, we have one grocery store, and that is definitely not good. Now, our surrounding cities or towns have more grocery stores. Like even the town of Bluefield, Virginia has probably 4. I know definitely 3 that I can think of off the top of my head. So, and they have a much smaller population than we do. So we only have one grocery store, and that is what sparked this Hugh Market project, which I'll go into even more detail, is the need, the severity of the need. One grocery store, we do have like a couple of Dollar Generals that sell some produce, but not like in large quantities, or even the grocery store component is not the big part of it. It's the major part of the store. It's more geared toward, the other retail items. And then we have gas stations, convenience stores, but just one grocery store. Next slide, please. All right, so I do want to talk to you about Hugh Market. Hugh it stands for historically urban, because here in the area I live in, it used to be very urbanized. So typically when people think of rural, we think of a lot of spread out land, farms, all of the countryside. However, where I live, it was booming, like largely booming at one time when coal was a big resource that we were using in the United States and just globally. So because coal has declined in the resource that we utilize for energy and things, it significantly impacted our economy, all of that, our demographic, our, population is the word I was looking for. So now we are rural, but we're really rural because of our population size. The area here, it still has like the infrastructure of what I would consider an urban area. Everything is kind of close, tight, walkable. Our downtown was very vertical, the buildings, very vertical, stacked. And also here where I live, it's very hilly, it's mountainous, and they're close, closer mountains. So a lot of hillsides, things like that make it to where you can't really farm. It's not that type of rural is what I'm saying. So Hugh Market is a rural grocery concept in Central Appalachia that connects local and regional producers to their respective communities through food retail. We intentionally look to partner with local and regional food suppliers to strengthen the food system and help make it a sustainable one for future generations. I already told you all the dilemma that we're in here in my city. One grocery store, 10,000 residents. And on top of that, what I didn't include in that statistic is about a fourth of our population is African American. So, not only are we marginalized with our food, then we also have another marginalized group of people that are even further, hurt or affected, I should say, by that. So again, going back to the urban landscape, that plays a part in this Hugh Market concept because we can't really farm here. So we rely on our surrounding local farm type communities, which are, a lot of them are in Virginia. There are some in West Virginia, but West Virginia just has more it's more mountainous. So we just don't have that capacity and ability. So we rely on our local and regional farmers and producers. And we need to have the retail system built to where the farmers and producers, and they can actually have a place to sell their goods and services to our community members. Next slide. So this leads to building the right connections. I personally, yes, I'm the founder of Mount Terra. Yes, this is a project that I've spearheaded, but I don't know it all. This is somewhat still new to me. Yes, I did work in a grocery store for a while when I was younger, and I love frequenting farmers markets and all of that kind of stuff. And I love to cook. However, building a food retail business is not a small feat because you need a lot of connections. There are a lot of moving parts, and it can be quite complex. Actually, it can be overwhelming too if you're not familiar with what to do and where to start. So now that I've been on this journey, I can help a lot of people along the way and say, oh, start here, go there. And also when you're able to connect with others in that space, be it a supplier or a connective resource, it really does make the journey so beautiful because you meet so many people, you network much better. And yeah, it's like the lifeline of our movement is building these connections. Next slide. So I did mention briefly about farmers and producers in particular. This right here is just kind of a snapshot. This isn't everyone or all of the groups, but this is a snapshot of the type of groups of people, of individuals that I've had to connect with, interact with, and continuing to build and nurture relationships with. And for example, farmers, I told you all, the city I live in, we can't really farm what you would consider traditional farming. However, the region I live in, there are farms. And a lot of those farmers, they're looking for retail opportunities to sell their products. And they can't go into a larger chain because they can't keep up with the supply that chain is gonna demand because the chain is much larger. But this is an opportunity for small retailers. And if you're thinking about starting one, it's a great opportunity to support your local and regional farmers who, again, they can't produce at a large scale, but what you can do for them is it's a blessing. Also, producers, I learned through this journey that there are many producers that, I mean, value added. There are a lot of small producers out here that are producing quality products. Again, they can't scale. They're not at that stage yet, but collectively, when you engage multiple ones, you might have someone over here making some jam or jelly, and then you might have bread makers over here, and then you have whatever it is, someone producing snacks, chips, but all of them together, when you have that variety, it just makes for a beautiful network. And then the customers enjoy having those options and especially being able to shop from local and regional producers. Agencies, look, the agencies, nonprofit, government agencies, local government, they are valuable resources to assist in this. I had no idea the different programs and opportunities that are out there, even being in this fellowship cohort. Man, it has been such a blessing gleaning from others and people that are over in another part of the country, but they're doing something very similar, and being able to bond those resources has been very, very valuable to me and my small team in this learning process. Also, a lot of times agencies can help with technical assistance and maybe some type of capital assistance or access to capital. They can help you with building plan, your business plan, and just getting very clear, which is a huge asset. Last, but it's definitely not least, it's actually at the top, is your community. Part of this partnership building is community is everything. They are not only your customers, but they're going to be like your fans. They're going to talk to their neighbor, tell people what you're doing and encourage others to go and support you. So I wanted to highlight definitely that community is the biggest thing. Now, also about the Hugh Market Project, I do want to tell you all, this has been an ongoing planning thing. We are actually launching, our anticipated launch is spring, summer, more leaning towards summer of 2024 to actually open the space. So we do have a building that we have acquired in our downtown. We wanted it to be centrally located. So we do have a space, and it kind of brings more of that urban kind of feel again, where you're in a downtown, it's central, people can get in via bus, bike, they can walk, which makes it very, very attractive for people who may have barriers to transportation. So we are planning to launch in 2024, actually open up the space. We are in the construction phase now, which is really good. And we have built up a huge list of suppliers. which is really good. And we are working on some little logistics on distribution and things like that, getting some of these things to us, because we are in a small community, and it is rural in a sense, it even in the landscape a little bit, but some of the places that we're getting things from regionally, it's the distribution is just not set up quite yet. So we're working through some of those kinks. And next slide. All righty. That is all that I have for you. If you're looking to connect, I am definitely open to talking to anyone who is interested. You can find me on Instagram at Kim Lee Ross, or you can send me an email. It's info@mountterra.com. It's not showing up good in the slide, but just want to let you know, hey, if you're out there doing it, I am one of your biggest supporters, and I know the journey that you're on, and I thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much, Kim. Super excited to jump into this conversation. There's a couple of comments in the chat. There are a couple of questions as well in the chat. And so, folks, I will invite you to, again, continue to add questions. We'll take as many questions as we can. We have a good chunk of time to do that. So you can use the Q&A button on your navigation bar, and we will start there. I want to make sure, so I'm going to invite Kim and Hallie back to this screen. I want to actually start with a couple of questions that I saw in the chat box originally. So let me stop this. There was a question that came in from Kisa. This was back, I think, Hallie, when you were presenting, and it said, how do you manage the power dynamics? How is power shifted? So maybe Hallie, if you can start with us, and Kim, if you want to add, feel free.
Sounds good. So I love this question, and it's a hard question, and we are still learning in everything that we're doing. But like I shared, I can share what we are doing right now and how it's been going. Like I shared, we really emphasize every time we create a new action team or advocacy team, spending the first couple meetings establishing what those shared expectations are. And that is really important for holding everyone in the group accountable. Members of those teams will kind of call people in when they notice that some of those expectations aren't being met, or the agreements that they had are being broken by different people's actions or words. And so we have been leaning into that. We did a intensive training about conflict transformation, because we want people to feel comfortable to bring up issues that they're seeing or tensions that they're seeing, and to be able to talk through it together. So I think that's been really important, and being able to manage power dynamics is having people know that engaging in conflict is okay, and healthy ways to do that and to talk it out with people and be respectful. So that's one thing that we've done. I think another thing that we have been working on is we have been seeing a lot in our community that that individuals and community members are having sometimes negative experiences in accessing food and aren't being listened to, or their experiences are kind of being discounted. And so what we have been doing is just being sure that we are taking what those community members are sharing with us and listening very deeply and acknowledging their experiences, and then bringing them together with a group of people that can help support them to approach whatever organization it is. And we've really leaned into community leadership with this. We've just tried to create safe or brave spaces, whatever you want to call it. Probably brave, safe spaces fits better, where we can have these conversations openly, and then discuss what strategy our community members want to take. Sometimes they'll ask Food Policy Council staff to go to staff of other organizations to voice their concerns. Sometimes they'll ask us for support in arranging meetings to discuss concerns. And so that's another way that we've kind of been trying to balance power dynamics, is by bringing groups of people together to address issues that they're seeing with organizations or with across like a differential of power. And the last thing I'll add is that the Food Policy Council has been kind of like both a convener for organizations and now for community. And so standing in that middle gap can be really beneficial because we are able to build trust with organizations in order for them to really listen to and make changes based on what community is saying. And we kind of have been kind of like an entity that's been like forcing that accountability. And we've seen, we've also seen some benefit too in like maintaining those relationships with organization directors, but asking for their frontline staff to be in our meetings with community members, because those staff are really who people are interacting with every day and able to make more quick changes at organizations. So I hope something there was helpful for you.
Thanks so much, Hallie. And there's one other question. It's in the chat box, so I just want to make sure I don't lose it. And I think it sort of builds on what you were just talking about. And this is just the questions from Laurel. It says, can you talk more about what it looks like to find a place for everyone in the coalition and the structure of the coalition itself?
Yeah, so we have worked a lot on building a more defined structure in the past year. And what we decided to do is we have very specific teams with very specific goals. So like I mentioned, 3 of our teams are advocacy teams that are tasked with different policy issues that were voted on by our members. And then we've also got a few other teams that kind of work on more thematic or programmatic topics like racial equity, youth engagement, and then we have like a food pantry group. So those different groups with very distinct purposes and projects have been really good ways for people to find where they want to plug into the Food Policy Council. And then on top of that structure of the different action teams and advocacy teams, we also have our membership tiers. So we have kind of one that is called the engaged tier, where people just want to stay informed and up to date and maybe occasionally come to meetings. We've got the ACT tier. So that's people who are a part of our action and advocacy teams and really driving the work forward. And then we have a lead tier. And so that includes our community advisory board, who really directs the vision of the council. And then it also includes co-chairs for each of our teams. So that's what our structure looks like now.
I am really, what really resonates me is the various tiers and how you've described them in terms of engage, act, and lead. So allowing people to sort of get in and be a part of the work in a way that fits for them. So this next question is from an anonymous attendee. It says, and it's for Kim, it says, we had a local regional food distributor here in Michigan, Cherry Capital, recently shut their doors because they could not compete with the lower prices and larger volumes that larger non-regional distributors offer to grocers, retailers, etc. Kim, has the HU market experienced this? Or do you know of other regional hubs that have experienced this? How do these hubs balance growth to be financially stable and still serving their local regional communities and vision?
All right, that is an excellent question. And yes, a lot, actually, this is probably one of the hardest things for smaller retailers to deal with, is they don't get that margin like a larger one does. So the thing that we're doing, the approach that we're doing with Hugh, is incorporating more things like restaurant style, other ways of people purchasing without just solely relying on the that's what may be a small margin from the actual sale of the raw the raw goods. So as an example, one thing that we're doing is incorporating a commercial kitchen, and we'll have like recipes and things that that we make, and then highlight those things that come from the local regional producers and growers. So it's like and offer it in a pre-meal way, you know. I mean, that's kind of like the only thing that we know to do to set ourselves apart, but get the attention from the local people to know, hey, not only are you getting quality, not only are you buying local, but we are also going to show you how to do it, and even do it for you if you want to purchase it already done. So I guess adding like a restaurant style would be one way. That's really what it is. You almost have to go out more to appease the customer in a greater way, offer them more variety. Exactly. Essentially, it does create other streams of revenue, but it gives the locals a reason to shop with you and a reason to buy local, because education has been and still is, and it probably will be, an ongoing huge part of getting that local buy-in. A lot of times, you know, they are price driven because we've been programmed to think price.
Yeah.
And then also people's money, you know, resources are squeezed. So we have to go out a little bit outside of just the traditional, we're just a grocery store, come and shop here, to, hey, we're a grocery store, but we have these cool recipes and we can sell the food and all of that. Am I to answer this question live?
You talking about the question? There was just a question in the chat box, so I will invite folks to also add your questions to the Q&A, but we'll answer this one and then we'll jump back into what we have in the Q&A. This question looks like from Portia. It says, will you rent out your commercial kitchen to value added producers?
You know, Portia, that is definitely a goal. Where we're moving into now, or starting now, it's a little too small. The space is small, and we wouldn't be able to do it. We wouldn't have the capacity. However, that is something that I definitely would love to offer in the future as we expand, because that's a barrier. That right there is a barrier for a lot of producers. They just don't have a commercial space, and we don't have a place here that offers that. So yes and no, not yet, but it's definitely in the plan.
And I think it's really powerful about all good. I think it's really powerful how you're creating a space for this, for lack of a better phrase, I'm going to say grocery store, but for the market to be more than just a store, to be a spot and a space for the community to also connect with one another. I think that's really, really amazing, and designing spaces that are meant for us in our communities. This next question comes from Sarah. It says, hi, thank you for presenting. There's a question for Hallie. It says, what are some ways you empower members to actively participate and act? I think you've talked about that a little, but there's a second question here around, how do you connect urban and rural communities in terms of food chain coordination and distribution?
Yeah. So yeah, I've talked a little bit about how we empower our members to actively participate. I think one thing I'll add here that I haven't mentioned yet is that for our members who are not doing this as a part of their job, we provide compensation for them. So we'll provide like $25 an hour to any of our community members who are doing this kind of more on a volunteer basis and not a part of their job. So that has been a way to also manage power dynamics and make sure everyone's being compensated for the time that they're putting into this. And then connecting urban and rural communities. I think our food chain team is probably where we're doing this the best. And we do need to do more outreach into our rural communities. I'll say the Zoom meetings have been very helpful to be able to engage our rural partners so that they aren't having to travel long distances for meetings and are able to participate regularly. And just relying on some of our farmers or our food processors to bring in their connections with ranchers and others has been really helpful too. So that I think we need to do a better job of connecting with rural communities. It's something we want to focus on next year. But that's kind of what we've done so far.
Next question. This one is from Sarah for Kim. I'm not sure if we answered it already, but I want to make sure we uplift it. It says, what kind of solutions are you considering for distribution between your local and rural growers and processors and your central location?
Yeah, Sarah, actually earlier this month, I was at a gathering it was hosted by West Virginia Food and Farm Coalition, and it was called the Rural Grocer Network. And it was a really, really good gathering because it had that mix of growers, producers, all of that, retailers, and distribution was the one thing that none of us have quite fully nailed down and figured out. However, what I did learn there was there are some local smaller people who have taken it upon themselves they'll do it. They will hit the road and go to these different places, grab the things for you and deliver them. Now for us, we will be engaging them, as well as we're looking at our own box truck, with the cooler in it capacity to be able to just go out and get it ourselves and see if some of these producers can meet us maybe in a more central location, and we could grab it that way and maybe just make a couple of rounds each week, at least twice or 2 or 3 times a week. So we're having to take that on to our own hands as well, partially, but I hope that changes.
Yeah, we've had such great questions coming in here. This one comes from Kisa. It says, how do you navigate burnout and capacity issues with your councils and projects? I'm imagining, Hallie, this might be a place for you to start, but Kim, if you have ideas, please feel free to add as well.
Yeah, I think this is a great question. Because we are only 2 staff members and we're managing this big coalition. So I kind of have 2 different sides of this. So to manage staff burnout, our fiscal sponsor has really great supports for time off for health and well-being. So we have 80 hours of sick leave that can be used for mental wellness every year. And so that to us is really important. And then the other thing for staff is just leaning on our members as much as possible. And so there are a lot of issues that get brought to us that we might not have the capacity to fully address ourselves, but that we can connect our members to each other so that they can act together on shared interests. Or if someone is looking to get food to a certain community, we can connect them with someone who might have extra food to bring. And so we play that connector role a lot when we don't have capacity to directly address something. And the community leadership that we're trying to build up is really both to expand our staff capacity. So we'll have, if our community is leading more and more of these projects and action teams, and we're just building capacity for them and supporting them, then we have more time to kind of work on more issues. So that is a really huge part of it for us. For our council members, to make sure that they don't get burnout, we have those stipends as support. We have different members or organizations that will only be involved on seasonal basis, like farmers or nonprofits that are supporting farmers. They'll only be involved during the non-growing season. And then I'll also say that we have had some of our co-chairs rotate out throughout the year just based on people's capacity and time. And so just allowing people to use those co-chair positions as a space to build their leadership while they have the time, and then having 2 of them really creates that consistency where if one person has to shift off, then we have someone else who's ready to step up. And we can bring in a new person who wants to build up their leadership skills.
Yeah. I'm going to try and get to as many questions as I can. I know there are a couple more here, and we're getting close to the end of our time. Hallie, I think this next question sort of builds on what you were talking about. It comes from Stephanie. It says, everyone is so busy and that's sometimes difficult to prioritize the Food Council's action plan. How do you get your council members to engage and implement the action plan and meet deadlines? Do you have the same people doing most of the work?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. So to answer the do we have the same people doing most of the work, I'll just kind of give you a gauge of what we saw this year in 2023. We had about 100 people participate at that ACT level, so engage in our different teams. And then we had about 20 people engaging at that lead level. So we do have some people that are on all of our teams and super passionate about everything. But for the most part, all of our teams have pretty distinct groups of people. And we have tried to implement an MOU structure with organizations. That hasn't been the most successful. I would say that it's just individuals buy into what this collective vision that they created is. And within the teams, we see a lot the members stepping up to make sure everyone is being held accountable. So people will take on different items based on their capacity to work on in-between meetings, or if someone has been coming to a lot of meetings and isn't coming as often, then another member of the team will take it on themselves to reach out and call them just to see what's going on. So I feel like we have been able to engage people just based on them having a lot of investment in the goals of these teams and relying on our members to hold each other accountable.
Okay, I have time for one final question. Kim, this one is for you. I think it goes back to some of the things you were talking about food retail models. It's from an anonymous attendee. It says, are there food retail models from elsewhere that you are looking at as examples?
Absolutely. That is absolutely what I do. I look at, some of them are I would say in Appalachia and even in West Virginia. There's one called Scott's Marketplace. They're in Vienna. And I just eat up their Instagram because they're just doing some amazing things. But they have incorporated restaurant style in with also selling just, the produce. And also I look at a lot of urban markets, like when I go to New York, whether it's Grand Central, there's just many, because what I learned is even like Whole Foods and Trader Joe's, when I read books about how they started, I think about how we're starting and a lot of others. They started with this pure, wholesome, we're going to get these local or regional producers, these smaller guys, because they're producing at a better quality or higher quality. But everybody starts to love it. And then you grow so big that then you're not the same anymore, right? So yes, I have absolutely gleaned from all of those and many others.
Thank you so much, Kim. I know there are a couple more questions and I'm not able to get to them all, but I just want to take a moment to thank Hallie and Kim for sharing your time, your wisdom, your gifts, for talking about how you are connecting with and building, collaboratively building food systems that serve your communities and engaging them and partnering with them as leaders in that process. So before folks head out today, I just have a couple of things I want to share in terms of how you can stay connected with us, stay connected with our work. So our food systems fellows created a food systems roadmap, centering community leadership and power for an equitable, sustainable, and just food system. Here's a link to where you can download it. We'll also include that in the chat box so you can learn a little bit more about that. We are going to be celebrating unsung Vital Village Network's unsung heroes. So that's going to take place on Monday, December 11th. You can join us virtually or in person if you're in the Boston area. And so we'll make sure to share more about that opportunity as well. Also, our peer learning community and peer learning clusters. We have a peer learning and reflection hour that's coming up on Tuesday, December 12th from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern. So invite you to come. It's open to all who want to talk about their work and learn from peers around best practices. And so really invite you to come and join us. This year, we've been focusing on adverse childhood experiences and trauma-informed practices. I know we're at time, so I'm going to keep going. Our Now network survey is available, so we'll drop that link in the chat. Really love to hear from you about your experiences and connecting with the networks of opportunity for child well-being and the resources that we provide. Our podcast, we're wrapping up season 2 of In the Arena with Now. So new episode just dropped today, featuring one of the keynote conversations from our 10th annual leadership summit. So I invite you to check that out. Also a variety of resources around coalition building and designing and partnership, our dignity-centered guide to reflecting on cooperative funding structures. So lots of ways to engage and stay connected. I hope you will join us. Thank you for joining us for this 2023 webinar series. We wish you well, wish you a great end of the year, and we'll see you next year. Be well, everybody.